completed about asexual reproduction. And first of all, what is reproduction? Reproduction is the process of giving birth to the young ones of their own kind. That is reproduction. And we have already completed about the asexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Fine. We have already come to know about some examples also. And we have understood about the gametes. And in this class, we are going to understand about the sexual reproduction in the flowering plant, specifically about the flowering plant. Fine. So in this class, we are going to understand about the sexual reproduction in flowering plant. Okay. So you know what? There are many kinds of plant on the earth, but some plants are flowering plant, some are not. Fine. So there are so many examples like rose, hibiscus plant, fine. But and a money plant, which are non-flowering plant, aloe vera, which is also non-flowering plant, palm tree, which is also non-flowering, and there are many more which is flowering plant. Fine. So flowers is the important organ of the plant. We've already understood about the important organ of the plant. There are several organs like plant, leaf, stem, and roots. These are the important organ of the plant. And in the plant, the flower is the reproductive parts of the plant. But in this class, we will understood about the important organ, the structure of the plant, which part of the flower, is known as the reproductive part of the flower. Not every part is reproductive part. There are several parts which is known as considered as a reproductive part because it takes part in a reproduction. Okay. So first of all, let me tell you about the flowers. But first of all, let me draw a structure of the flower. See. These are the general structure of the flower. See, these are the general structure of the flower. Okay. You can draw many more. See, these are the general structure. You can draw by yourself also. So this is known as this broad part. This broader part is known as petals. This broader part is known as petals. Petals. Broader part. Generally, it is colorful. It is attractive. It is colorful and attractive. You know what? Why it happens? Why it is colorful? I'll tell you. I'll tell you the functions also. All right. So, and this is what? This is sepals. This is sepals. This is petal. This is sepal. This is known as the part from where flower is connected to the stem. Flower is connected to the stem is known as, either you can call it flower stalk or you can call it pedicel. Flower stalk or a pedicel. Pedicel or a flower stalk, right? This is in these parts. This is known as the stigma. This thinner part is known as style. This is the broader part is known as ovary. The inside part is known as ovule. And collectively, all this part is collectively is known as carpel. And what is that? This is the female reproductive part of the plant. Okay, female reproductive part of the plant. Whereas this one, this thin strand you can see here. So this one is what? This is anther. This is known as filament. This is known as filament. And collectively, we will call it stamen. Stamen, which is what? Which is a male reproductive part of the plant. All right? Clear? Any doubt till here? Okay. All right. So these are the parts of the flower. Okay. These are the basic part of the plant. You need to learn it. You need to remember it because it is very important. Fine. So flower is the what? Flower is the reproductive parts of the plant. How? I'll tell you. Flowering plant can reproduce more than one way. Flowering plant can reproduce more than one way. Fine. This is the flower. Flower is the reproductive part of the plant. Reproductive part of the plant. Reproductive part of the plant. It can reproduce. It can reproduce more than one way. More than one way. It can reproduce by more than one way. And you know what? A flower can reproduce by asexually as well as sexually method. By both. Flower can by both the method. By both the way. And sexual. Okay? It can reproduce by both the way, sexually and a sexually way. It means some plant doesn't contain the male reproductive part, and some flower doesn't contain male reproductive parts, but some plant contain both the reproductive part. So they're known as hermaphroditic plant. Hermaphroditic plant. There is a one insect. There's a animals in an animal category also. There's a hermaphroditic animal. Do you know which animal is known as hermaphroditic animal? You know the name of hermaphroditic animal? No, that is earthworm. Earthworm can reproduce by themselves. It doesn't need another male reproductive part or a female reproductive part. So the earthworm is known as hermaphroditic animal. Okay. See, the function of the flowering plant is the function of the flowering plant to make gametes. You know, I've already explained about the gametes. Gametes is what? Gametes is the fusion of male reproductive cell and a female reproductive cell. When male reproductive cell and a female reproductive cell fuse together, it forms gametes. Fine. And after forming gametes, gametes then convert into zygote. It forms zygote. And after that, fertilization happens. All right. If you don't know, there's a video which is already in the recorded form. You can watch that video. So it will be clear to you. Okay. The sepal. Sepal is generally in green in color. Sepal is what? It is always green in color. Okay. Yeah, sure. So this flower, which is a reproductive part. And the next one is, the function of the flower, the function. What is the function? The function of the flower. The function of the flower. The function of the flower is to make gametes. Is to make gametes. And how gametes formed? By the fusion of male and female gametes, or by the fusion of male reproductive cell and a female reproductive cell. Okay. Should I rub it? See, generally flowering plants reproduce through the sexual reproduction. Generally, flowering plants reproduce through sexual reproduction. Okay. Generally, flowering plant reproduce through sexual reproduction, and this is why flower is also represent as the reproductive part of a plant. Okay. So as I said, the typical part of the plant is what? The complete flowering plant. The complete flowering plant consists these parts. The flowering plant consists, as I already written, flowering plant consist the part like what? Like petals, sepals, pedicel, stamen, male reproductive part, and a carpel. And another one. Another one is also that is known as nectary. Nectary, which is present here. That is known as nectary. Nectary. I'll tell you what is the function of this. Nectary. Nectary. So these are the parts of the flower. A flower generally, yes, nectary, to attract insect, which releases the sugar like a liquid or sugary substance, which is known as nectar, to attract insect. That's very good. Right. So, one by one, we will study about that. Like, what is the function of petals? One by one, we will study about the function of these parts of the plant. So, petals. See, petals are what? Generally colorful. Petals are generally colorful. You know what? Why? Generally colorful. Colorful You know what? Why? To attract the insect. To attract the insect. And why it happens? Why they want to attract the insect? They want to attract the insect for pollination. Why? For pollination. Yes, exactly. For pollination. You know what is pollination? You can turn on your mic. Okay. If you don't have any issues, you can turn on your mic and you can speak up. What is pollination? Pollination is the process of transferring pollen grain from the anther to stigma. Okay. This is the process of pollination. Generally, pollination to attract the insect. Next one is sepals. Sepal is what? Sepal is generally green in color. It is what? Green in color. Green in color. And from where? From the sepal, petal is connected. From the sepal, petal is connected. Pericell. It is known as flower stalk. It is known as flower stalk. Through the flower stalk, flower is connected to the stem. Flower stalk help to connecting in the connecting to the stem. Connected to the stem. Okay. Stamen. Stamen is what? As a male reproductive part of the plant. It is what? It is a male reproductive part of a plant. Reproductive part of the plant. I've already drawn a picture that it consists, stamen consists anther and what? Anther and filament. It consists anther and filament. Anther and filament. And anther which consists what? It consists, it is not visible. It's not visible. So stamen has two parts, anther and filament. And anther, it consists pollen grain. It consists pollen grain in a dusty form. It consists pollen grains. Pollen grain in the dust form, right? Or a dust particle in the form of dust particle that is known as anther. Next one is carpel. Carpel is what? It's a female reproductive part of the plant. It's a female reproductive part of the plant. Female part of the plant. And it consists, what it consists? Stigma, style, ovary, and ovule. Stigma, style, ovary, and ovule. Nectar. Nectar consists a sugary liquid, sugary liquid, which is known as nectar, to attract the insect. Right. So these are the parts of the plant. These are the functions of the plant. Sorry, not plant, flower. Function of the flower. So as I told you, there are some plant which is known as hermaphroditic plant, in which those plant which has both male and female reproductive part, they don't need to pollinate. They don't need pollen grain from the another plant. They have pollen grain. They have pollen grain in the same plant, in the anther. Fine. So that is known as hermaphroditic flower. Those flower is known as hermaphroditic flower. Okay. Next one, I have already told you. Do you have any doubt till here? I don't think you have any doubt till here. Okay, that's fine. So what is the now? What is the procedure of reproduction in the flower? So you know what? Pollen grain on ovule. What is the function of pollen grain on ovule? Could you please tell me where ovule is located? Could you please tell me where ovule is located? Yeah, inside the ovary. Fine. That's right. Inside the ovary. You know what? And what is pollen grain? Pollen grain is generally located in the anther. In the pollen grain is located in the. It is found in the anther. So the male gamete are inside the pollen grain. Where the dust particle which is present inside the anther is known as what? Male gametes in the flower. For the flower, the male gametes or a male reproductive cells is present in the form of what? In the form of pollen grain. And pollen grain is found inside the, it is found inside the anther. And it is what? It's a male gametes. It is male gametes. It is known as male gametes. Known as male gametes. Okay? The pollen grain, and which is made in the anther, which is present, which is founded, which is made in the anther. Okay? So, what happened? How reproduction happens? So when some insect sit on the flower, so the pollen grain stick on their leg or any part of their body, and then after that, that pollen grain goes to the stigma. Stigma is what? The function of stigma is to catch pollen grain. The function of stigma is to catch pollen grain, goes to the stigma, and through the stigma, and from the stigma to what? To the style, it goes to the ovary, and inside the ovary is reached to the ovule, and where the flower reproduce egg cells, and after the fusion of the egg cells of the stigma with the pollen grain, they fuse together and mate and fertilize. Right? Isn't it? Do you know the process of meiosis? Do you know the process of meiosis? No, you don't know the process of meiosis? See, meiosis is the process we have already discussed in the last class. Meiosis is the type of cell division. Meiosis is the type of cell division in the sexually reproducing organism. Okay, so meiosis is the what? Meiosis is the type of cell division which generally occurs in the sexually reproducing organism. Okay. You got it? What I said till here? Yeah, okay. So the next term is what? You know, the female gametes are inside the ovule. As I said, the female gamete present inside the ovule in the form of eggs. Fine. In the plant, and when stigma catch the pollen grain is in the form of fine dust particle, which present on the anther. Fine. So female gamete are inside the ovule. In the ovary, they have also been made by meiosis. That's why I asked you about the meiosis. Meiosis is the process of cell division in the sexually reproducing organism. Fine. So here, how female gametes reproduce? Female gametes reproduce by the process of meiosis. Okay, each ovule contain a nucleus. If you see the structure of the ovule, it's these kind of a structure. Fine. You can also refer your book. There's a diagram. So each ovule consists a nucleus. Each ovule consists a nucleus, and by when pollen grain came to the from the nucleus ovary to the ovule, here the fusion of pollen grain and the eggs, you can say eggs or a female gametes, when fertilized together or fused together, both nucleus combine together and make a nuclei. Okay, make a nuclei. Each ovule contain a nucleus, and fertilization happen when pollen grain nucleus fuses with ovule nucleus. Pollen grains nucleus, like suppose these are the pollen grains nucleus, and this one is the ovules nucleus. Then they fuse together or combine together, they fertilize. So converted into one nucleus. Both nucleus converted into one nuclei. Converted into one nuclei. And here, that's how fertilization occurs. Okay? Clear? This is the whole process of fertilization. Next process is what? Next process is pollination. Next process is pollination. Do you know what is pollination? What is pollination? Pollination is the process of pollination is the process of transferring pollen grain from anther to a stigma. That is known as pollination. You know, fertilization takes place only when male gametes travel to the female gametes. Male gametes, that pollen grain is known as male gametes. And the female gamete is what? Which is present in the ovule. So when pollen grain transfer to the stigma, and through the stigma it goes to the ovule. So that's how fertilization takes place. The first stage of the transferring or a pollination or a first stage is what? The first stages of pollen grain to be taken to the anther is known as pollination. Pollination is what? Pollination is the first stage of fertilization. It is the first stage of fertilization. It is the first stage of fertilization. Pollination is the first stage of fertilization in the flowering plant. In the flowering plant. Okay. Generally, who is the agent of the pollination? Who does pollination? Actually, generally, insects are the main source. Insects are the main agent which carried pollen grain from the one plant. Yeah, wind, insects, that's right. But insects are the insects known as the main agent. Fine. So, insects, they are often carried out by insects. For example, there are many insects like honeybee and other one, honeybee or other kind of insects, which is known as like red color of insect, which has a black spot on that. I just forgot the name. There are several insects which carries pollen grain from the anther to a stigma. Okay, so you know what? Why it happens? Because that's why flower has a colorful petals, so that they can and a nectar, so that they can attract the insect. Colorful petals which attract, and the nectar, the smell of nectar attract the insects. Fine. Honeybee, yeah, I have told you already example. I have already told you the example like honeybee. And there is one ladybug. Yeah, ladybug. All are the example of pollinating agent. Fine. They just sit on the flower, suck the nectar, and pollen grain stick on their body and transfer to the stigma. That's how pollination happens. Fine. Have you understood? Do you have book? Do you have book with you? Okay. So if you have book, refer your book and just look at the page number 202, 202. That's good. Okay, fine. So here you can see the book, and there's a picture, there's a diagram of an anther, a young flower anther, and you know what? Line along with, you know what I said? There's a lines on the, have you ever seen the lines on the petals? Have you ever seen colorful lines? You know what? Some flowers, why it is so? Why lines are present on the petals? Why it is so? Not sure. Okay. There's a line present on the petals because that lines is known as the guidelines. That lines are known as the guidelines because the line on the petals is guided the insects where? To the inside the base of the plant, inside the base of the petals. Inside the base of the petal. What is the base of the petal? That is the base of the petal is known as ovule. That's why line is present on the petals. Right? This is just a general information you should know. Okay. So here's the diagram how pollen is made. So there's an anther and filament, and pollen sac is present on the anther and containing and developing pollen grain like a small kind of egg-like a structure, which is stick. But if you will see it, you cannot see with your naked eyes, fine, because and it will feel like a dusty kind of a structure. Sometime when you touch the flower, so you will feel that some dusty kind of a substance stick on your finger, but you cannot see, but it's cannot visible by your naked eyes clearly. So that is a pollen grain, right? That is only pollen grains. So this is the pollination. It is the first stage of the fertilization in a plant, and it carries pollination is the transferring of pollen grain from the anther to stigma. And pollination can happen by two ways. The first one is self-pollination, and the second one is cross-pollination. Pollination can happen by two ways. It can happen by two ways. That is self-pollination. And the next one is cross-pollination. Cross-pollination. Do you know what is self-pollination? Do you know what is self-pollination? Tell me, what is self-pollination? Tell me. Pollen grain carried from the anther to the stigma pollen grain carried from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. Can you give me some example of the flower? Can you tell me the name of the flower in which self-pollination happens? Can you give me one example? Tell me the name of one flower in which self-pollination happens. Have you ever heard about the hibiscus plant? Have you ever heard about the hibiscus plant? Have you seen hibiscus plant? Not plant, in which the hibiscus plant, you will see the hibiscus flower. So in the hibiscus flower, self-pollination happens because in the hibiscus flower, both female and male reproductive parts are present. Fine. That is known as self-pollination. Pollen grain carried from anther to stigma of the same plant, which doesn't mean same plant of the same flower. Fine. Like there is a flower present on the plant. There are so many flowers present on the plant. So it is possible that insects are sitting on the one flower of that plant, and after that it will again sit on the another flower of the same plant. So that anther will stick on the body of the insect, and when it sits to the another flower of the same plant, so that anther will transfer to the another flower. So that's how pollination happens. That is known as self-pollination. On the other hand, cross-pollination, if pollen grain transfer to a stigma of the different flower, pollen grain transfer anther to stigma. Anther to stigma, yeah, of the different plant of same kind, different plant of same species, not on the another species, right? Like if a rose plant's pollen grain is transferred, a rose plant pollen grain cannot transfer to the another one, like a lily plant pollen grain. It doesn't happen. Same species plant, it transfers from the different plant of a same species flower, right? That is known as cross-pollination. For example, if an insect is sit on a flower of one plant, so after that, it will just fly away to the another plant of the same species. That's how anther is transferred to the, pollen grain is transferred to the anther to stigma. Clear? I hope it is clear. Now there are several agents. Which help to transfer the pollen grains. Agent which help to transfer the pollen grain. Agents which helps to transfer pollen grain. Who are those agents? The first one is wind. Or you can either write the agent of the pollination, or you can write the way of the pollination. The first one is what? Wind pollination. How pollination happens? Through the wind. Through what? Through the wind. Okay. Some plant in which wind carries the pollen between the flowers. Okay. In some plant, pollen grain is transferred through the wind. Like, give some examples. Through wind is carried, the pollen grain is carried through the wind. Give some examples. Can you give me some examples? That is grass plant. Fine. There's a grass plant, which is also mentioned in your book. Grass plant. In the grass plant, grass pollens is transferred from anther to stigma through the wind. Okay? Through the wind. Because it is very light in weight. The weight of the pollen grain is very, very light. That's how the wind can also carry from one place to another, and it reach to the stigma of the same species of the plant. That's how pollination happens. Okay. The next one is insect pollination. Next one is what? Insect pollination. Insect pollination is what? Pollination happens with the help of insects, as I told you before. Fine. So there is a difference between a comparison or a difference between insect pollination and a wind pollination. Difference or comparison between insect pollination and wind pollination. There's a wind pollination. What is the difference between the? Of course, we can understand. It is by default understood that wind can only carry those kind of pollen which is a light in weight. The heavy weight or a large in size of the pollen grain, wind cannot carry it. It means if the large size pollen grains carried by the insect. Fine. So large conspicuous petals and with the guidelines. Conspicuous petals with the guidelines. As I told you, what is guideline? Guideline is present on the petals. The lines which is present on the petal is known as guidelines. So it carried large conspicuous petals. Conspicuous petals. Conspicuous petals, and guidelines carried by the insect. It happens through the insect pollination, whereas small pollen grains, small or a lightweight small pollen grains, inconspicuous petals or no petals at all. So wind pollination is happened with those kind of flowers in which there is no guideline or no petals are present, or which is small or lightweight pollen grain are present. Small or no. Wind pollination happens in the small kind of flower, which is a very least amount of pollen grain present, or a very lightweight pollen grain are present, and no petals present. But insect pollination happens with those kind of flowering plant in which large pollen grains or a heavy weight as compared to the another, or conspicuous petals are present and a guidelines petal are present. Fine. Do you know the another difference? See, insect pollination is happen when insect pollination is only happen when the flowering plant or the flower is a strongly scented plant. It's a strongly scented plant. It happens with a strongly scented plant so that it can attract the insects. It happens with a strongly scented plant. But wind pollination can happen with a no scent plant because there is no need to attract the wind. It happens with a no scented plant. Okay. No scented plants. Generally in flowering plant or those plant which has insect pollination happens, they have nectaries present in it, or the release nectar. Fine. Nectaries present at the base of the petals. Obviously, nectaries is present where? At the base of the petals, so that it can attract the insect to just suck the nectar. Right. Those plants, they have generally nectaries present. Nectaries present at the base of the petals. Base of the petals. And those kind of plants in which wind pollination happens, there is no nectar present. There's another example of the plant in which wind pollination happens, that is known as cotton plant. Okay, that is cotton plant. So no nectar is present. Those plants, they don't have nectaries present. All right. Next is stigma inside the flower. Stigma is present inside the flower. An insect has to brush past them to reach nectar. So, you know what? Where is next? Yes, cotton plant. That's right. You know what? As we have already looked at the diagram of the flower, so you have seen that stigma is present just the upper side of the plant, and beneath the stigma there is an ovule, there's a ovary and ovule, and after that inside there is what? There's a petal connected to the from the petal. There's a you know what? The base of the petal there's a nectar present, but under the base of the petals there's a ovary and ovule present. So to suck nectar, insect has to go through the stigma. Insect has to go through the stigma, and during the way they have to go to the stigma. They just release the what? Anther. That's how anther reach to the stigma. By the how they reach to the nectaries, by going through the what? Stigma. That's how they just release. They just the pollen grain which is stuck on the body of the insect. They just release. They just left the pollen grain to the stigma. That's how they get nectar. That's why nectar is present to the base of the petals, right? Sticky or spilky pollen grain. In where there is an insect pollination happens, those kind of flowering plant, they have sticky or a spiky pollen grains. They have sticky or spiky pollen grains. That's why they can stick to the insect's body. Fine. Sticky pollen grains. Which type of pollen grains they are having? Sticky pollen grains, which stick to this insect, which stick to insect's body. But when wind pollination is happened to those kind of flowers which do not have a sticky pollen grain stigma, and their stigma is large and feathery. Their stigma is what? It's a large in size and a feathery. That's how it can float through the wind. Okay, they have smooth pollen grain. They have smooth pollen grain. Fine. They have smooth pollen grain and a lightweight also. So they have smooth and lightweight. That's how it can float through the wind. Right. Which can be blown in the wind. Which can be blown in the wind. Blown in the wind. Blown in the wind. Are you getting? Getting the difference? Fine. And the quite large quantity of pollen made. So the plant, the flowering plant in which insect pollination happens, in which large quantity of pollen grain made or prepared in the anther. So, fine. So that some will eaten by the insect and some will stick on the body of the insect. Clear? And in the wind and the plant or the flowering plant in which wind pollination happens, they have very large quantity of pollen grain made because most will be blown away. Most will be blown away and travel to the one flowering plant to the another flowering plant and reach from anther to stigma. So these are the basic difference between the insect pollination and the wind pollination. Do you have any issue till here? Understood. That's it. All right. Okay. Our next topic is what? Next topic is fertilization. Fertilization. Do you know the basic definition of fertilization? Do you know what is fertilization? Do you know what is fertilization? Could you please tell me about the fertilization? Do you know what is fertilization? Can you define the fertilization? Fertilization is the process of producing the young ones of their own kind. That is the basic definition of the fertilization. But here we are studying about the flowering plant. Fertilization in the flowering plant, fine. So we have studied about what? We have understood several things. And we have already studied about the pollination. Why it is important to understood? Because after pollination, anther, male gametes reach to the female gametes. Right. So after pollination, the male gametes in the form of pollen grain, fine, reach to the stigma. From a stigma, it reached to the what? Reach to the ovule, fine, and is not, and there they fuse together. They fuse together and fertilizes. Right. So the where is ovule present? I hope it is clear. Ovule, where is ovule present? I've already told you about the ovule. Where is ovule present? Ovule is present inside the ovary. Fine. So pollen grain reach to the ovule through the ovary and they fuse together. As I've already explained you through the diagram also. And the nucleus and the nuclei of the male gametes and the female gamete fuse together and convert into one nucleus. And fertilization occurs. Clear? This is known as fertilization. This process is called fertilization. So you can look at your book. There's a diagram, fertilization in a flower. So as I said the process, but this is what? This is the general process of fusion, general process of fertilization, or general process of the fusion. But it's not very easy to reach the pollen grain to the ovule. You know what? Ovule is surrounded by the several layers of the cells. Fine. The ovule is surrounded by the ovule is surrounded by the several layers of the cell. Several layers of the cells is known as integuments. Cells is known as, or is called, integuments. or microcells, which is known as cells or the integuments. And here you can look at the picture. It is just like that. Like in the ovary, it is like these kind of structure. It is these kind of a structure. Okay. These kind of a structure, right? These kind of structure present in it is known as nucleus. This is known as, this one is what? This one is ovule, and this is known as nucleus. This, the shaded part is known as the nucleus. Nucleus of female reproductive gametes. Fine. And this one is known as micropyle. This one is known as micropyle. You can refer your book. You can look at the picture of the book and the broader part. Let me draw a picture. See, this is the rough diagram of the ovule. This is a rough diagram of the ovule. So here, this is the wall of the ovary. This is what? This is the wall of the ovary. Wall of the ovary. This is the wall of the ovary. This one, this shaded part is known as the nucleus. This shaded part, this one is known as the nucleus. Okay. This one is nucleus. And this one is known as integuments. This is known as integuments. This is integuments. It's known as the outer covering of ovule. Integuments is known as what? It is, what is that? Outer covering of ovule. Why it is necessary? To protect the ovule. Outer covering is known as female nucleus, fine, female nucleus, and this one here. This one is what? Male nucleus or a pollen grain. Or a pollen grain is just trying to reach to the ovule. Okay? Pollen grain or a pollen tube, through the pollen tube, it's trying to reach to the ovule. Okay? See, this is what? This is style, this is stigma, this is style, and this one is pollen grain. It's trying to reach to the ovule, the dot part. The dot part, this is stigma, this is style, and this is ovary, this is ovule, and here is the pollen grain is trying to reach to the ovule to collide with the what? Nucleus of the female reproductive part. All right. So this is the basic diagram of the ovule. Okay. the small hole in the integument. See, you can see the small hole in the integument, which is known as the micropyle. The small hole which is present on the integument is known as the micropyle. Fine. The small hole, here you can see the small hole here, small opening present on the integument, which is known as what? Micropyle. Micropyle. Okay. Micropyle, you can call it micropyle or micropyle, whatever you can pronunciate. Right? Do you have any doubt till here to understood about the ovary, ovule, stigma, style? Do you have any doubt? All right. So that's all for today. In our next class, we will study more about the seeds. How plant will grow through the seeds. We'll study more about the seeds, that how plant will grow through the seeds. Some plants have a bigger seed, some plants have a smaller seed. So why it happens, and how plant reproduce through the seeds. That's what we will study in our next class. So that's all for today. I hope you understood everything. If you have any doubt, you can ask. All right. So bye-bye for today.